As a child, I was always scared of horror. So much that when it came to horror advertisements on TV, I would close my eyes and ears and cower in a corner until my mom told me it went away. But as I got older, I started getting more and more adjusted to horror, and thanks to the many hours of Five Nights at Freddy's Let's Plays, this boy had turned into a man.
Now you're a man! A man, now you're a man!
Well, at least when it came to horror. Now, I rather enjoy horror, and since I'm a filthy weeb, I enjoy Japanese horror. This sounds like it could be a horror Japan kind of thing, and well, it might be. But Japanese and Western horror are actually quite different in the way that they design their monsters. Western horror designs are very subtle. The creatures made in Western horror don't look overly scary unless put into context, as normally looking at them, they don't look overly grotesque. When it comes to horror monsters from Japan, however, the natural reaction I feel is, oh my gosh, what the hell is that? The thing that interests me about Japanese horror is these grotesque monsters they create. It's as if they created a creature a mind will never truly be able to comprehend. So with my newfound interest in Japanese horror, I set out to find a horror manga that would be just perfect for my current interest in horror. Since I was new, I wanted to start with something lighter, and not just jump right away into things like Junji Ito. And after looking at some manga for a bit, I found Mieruko-chan. What makes Mieruko-chan special is it's not just a horror, but a comedy that uses horror elements in its plot and artwork. The most appealing thing about the manga is this stark contrast between the comedical situations and the horrific monster that the main protagonist has to deal with. On the surface, the stark contrast between horror and comedy makes the manga, well, interesting. The idea is interesting enough just from a conceptual standpoint that it's gonna cause people to read it. On top of that, the mixing of horror and comedy, these lighter and darker tones, allows the author to write whatever kind of story they want, whether it be wholesome, heartbreaking, dramatic, or just comedic. And it works really well for the manga. However, very recently, I heard that Mieruko-chan got an anime, and well, I had my doubts. Now, you might be wondering, why would I have my doubts about an anime from a manga that I like? Japanese style horror is very dependent on its artwork, and in my opinion, it's actually a lot like fan service. A weird comparison to make, definitely, but let me explain why. A lot of neuron-activating fan service works really well in manga, since it's an image and not a video. Therefore, it's not as restrictive when it comes to creation. Sometimes an attractive pose can make you laugh instead once some movement's added to it. Horror works the same way. It's a medium that works a lot better in black and white and standing still. This is because one of the biggest aspects of horror is comprehension. It's the same reason a horror creature is a lot scarier before you see it, since your imagination creates a more horrifying image than you could ever put on paper. Thinking back to the horror monsters of the West, you realize that they play off of this idea of comprehension, as monsters' powers are vague, or they hide their grotesque features behind apparel to increase the horror by limiting comprehension.
That's what the point of the mask is.
Color and movement are things we instantly identify with, and can help you comprehend the monster. This is probably why there are not a lot of popular horror animes, with the highest rated ones being other action animes with horror elements or psychological horrors. On the other hand, comedy is the exact opposite, as it benefits from things like movement and color. That's because comedy is actually better when you can comprehend the actions of the characters. Comedy is all about relatability. A joke is funny when you understand its meaning and can relate to what it's making fun of. Even slapstick could be completely boring if you didn't comprehend that the characters are feeling pain. Even the most abstracted nonsensical memes of our generation come from many layers of references the reader must comprehend first. This is why a lot of popular comedy anime seem to have great or at least decent anime adaptations. So since Mieruko-chan uses both of these elements, it was interesting to see how it would go with the first episode. Mieruko-chan is an adaptation that would actually have to be handled carefully, but because it's not just a horror manga, it probably would be at least decent. So I'm gonna take a look here at how the studio managed to make an adaptation of the source material. It's important to note here I'm not rating the manga or the anime, but rather how it holds up as an adaptation. I have issues with the manga and I have things that I absolutely love about it, but they will not be mentioned here. Starting with the anime, the beginning of it is very different from how the manga is. As opposed to the manga, the anime takes its time and spends the first 15 minutes of the episode building up the suspense, in order to deliver an impactful first appearance of the spirits that Miko has to deal with. During this time, the anime is careful to not expose us to any of the spirits, as to increase the impact when it finally occurs. By comparison, the manga starts off with Miko seeing her first spirit. I like the way the anime does it, but I believe both are perfect for the medium that they're in. For the manga, they need to introduce the world and the concept to the readers quickly, in order to gain an audience and their attention. For an anime, however, the audience is normally a lot more patient. As such, they're allowed to force the audience to wait in order to deliver a more impactful first scene. The main thing that I was scared for this adaptation was the spirits, and how they would be presented, specifically for all the reasons I mentioned above. The anime does a good job, as they seem to understand needing to make sure the spirits aren't comprehended. As opposed to the characters that are colorful and bright, the spirits are dark and monotoned in order to exaggerate their otherworldly factors. They are drawn with rough outlines as opposed to clean ones of the characters. Each design decision for the monsters are to express how otherworldly they are and reduce the chances of comprehension from the audience. The art style of the anime is decent, and this contrast that I mentioned is actually both in the OP and ED. The comedy is there and funny, and in my opinion they do justice for one of my favorite scenes, where Mieruko is being scared on her bed. This joke works really well, as we've all hidden our beds to avoid ghosts before, so we instantly find it relatable. However, there is one thing about this first episode I would be remiss if I didn't mention, and that is, wow, this episode was funny. It's frustrating too. The manga really didn't delve into fan service, and it's very distracting and an unnecessary addition. I mean, look how they changed some of these scenes to fit in some fan service. Oh, wait, it's there. It's all there. Funny! So yeah, the manga is actually very horny. It does, however, get progressively less horny as the story develops over time. So much so that it caused me to completely forget about it. I mean, look at this. Why is she wearing a shirt and I can see right through it? I mean, I know you can somewhat see through white shirts, but this just feels unrealistic. And when fan service is making you question reality, you can bet I'm not paying attention to the story. So yeah, the fan service in the first episode is distracting, but at least it stays true to the source material. But it's still distracting to other aspects of the show. So we all know the positive things I said. So does it hold up as an adaptation? And sadly, and that's where I'm gonna cut you off. Hi people still listening, I'm from the future. Sorry this video took so long to make, I've been moving, and well, I guess you don't care about that, do you? Either way, I wanted to bring this up because it's unironically important to the video. Originally, I felt the adaptation did a good job, but still would not live up to the original manga, due to the limitations of the media that it's in. However, as I've been moving and spending time, I found myself more and more excited to watch the new episode every week. And as such, my opinions have changed. While I still have my grievances about the issues of horror, I realized there was a big issue with my original theory. I did not account for something that's important in both horror and comedy, and that is audience reactions. Horror and comedy are both made to gain a reaction out of the audience, a reaction that's sharp and quick, whether it be laughter or fear. The show uses this to its advantage as seen in the first episode. The pacing is built around this idea. It takes time to deliver the scare or the punchline. In manga, pacing exists, but to much less degree. As pacing is more dependent on the reader's, well, reading speed, this gives the adaptation something that the manga doesn't have, and something it has benefited from. I would give the Mieruko-chan adaptation a pass, not only because it handles some of the important things it needs to handle well, it also gives a new dimension to the original source material, giving it something that you wouldn't gain from the manga. So I would go out and watch the adaptation if you're a fan of the manga, or just interested in the idea. Maybe just not during the month of November though.